All right, I would like to welcome everyone to our monthly Opportunities in Health IT session. I am Charlene Banta. I'm the Program Director of the Health IT program at St. John's River State College here in St. Augustine. And we are, as always, pleased to partner with the Northeast Florida Health Information Management Association to offer these monthly Lunch and Learn sessions where we feature the stories of health IT and health information management professionals. So a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted, so feel free to enter any questions in the chat box. One CEU will be granted for attendance, and the process for claiming that credit will be shared at the end of the session. And if you are a student and you're looking to get course credit for being here today, do be sure that you have your full name displaying. You can enter it in the chat box or rename yourself in the session. And finally, the session is being recorded. So our speaker today is Catrena Lewis. Catrena has a whole host of coding certifications. She is KIWI-TEK's Audit and Education Manager and has over 20 years of experience in the HIM industry. She holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and is also has the certificate in healthcare technology. She is presently a law student at Florida State University. So Catrena additionally is the president of our NEFHIMA association, and we're just so grateful to have you with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Banta. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share with the students today because, of course, I've been where you are, and sometimes it can be a little scary in the beginning, especially when you're trying to map out your career. But hopefully, as you're going throughout the program, those things are becoming clearer to you. And hopefully you're attending these monthly sessions and hearing from other professionals like me. It can give you some good advice to help you along your path. My thoughts are that we want to get information from people. Of course, you want to learn about their path, but you chart your own course. You map out the way that works best for you. And that's definitely what I've done in my career. And it wasn't always easy. But then, what good things do come so easy? I mean, we've got to work for things. So as Dr. Banta mentioned, my name is Catrena Lewis, and I'm currently KIWI-TEK's Audit and Education Manager. As we move forward, I'll tell you a little bit more about what that actually means. The title itself can be a little bit, what's the word? Maybe. It just could be a little bit, it will make you think one thing, but really my job it encompasses a lot of other things, and it's actually mostly compliance related. I also own a consulting company, which was a recommendation that was given to me. At this point, it's been, I believe this is my 11th year. I think April will be 11 years. But I own a consulting company, and so I do some work out of there, presenting things, expert witness, testimony, things like that. I've been employed in the HIT field for over 20 years. But I started out actually prior to that, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but you're not going to see this on my career map because it wasn't an actual job. I started out just helping my grandmother out in the billing office because she was a director at a group practice. And I just liked spending time with her. And she sent me, she connected me with one of the ladies in the billing office. I was a teenager. And that's where I kind of got it piqued my interest in billing first off. And I didn't even know what healthcare technology was or health information management. I just knew I liked looking at all of these different claims. Back then, they were paper claims. I liked looking at all of these claims and looking at the different payer policies and how you had to submit the claims and what had to be on the claims. All that stuff just interested me as a teenager. As she mentioned, I have a degree in criminal justice, which is laughable to most people, but I am very passionate about social justice. And so for me, criminal justice, although it's not in my career field, it was something that I really did want to do, and I wanted more education about that. And I had already been working many years in the HIM or HIT field before I got my criminal justice degree. As she mentioned, I'm also a first-year law student at Florida State University. And it's challenging, but I'm loving every minute of it. I hold 3 NEFHIMA credentials and 5 AAPC credentials. And what I tell people is that each one of those credentials holds a story. And they actually, every single one of them has been important to my career progression. So for example, my very first credential was the CPC, which is a Certified Professional Coder, and that was through the American Academy of Professional Coders. Now, I was already a coder at the point where I got this degree, and I was working in a job where, frankly, they did not require certification. But I started, you know, you pay attention to different magazines, you pay attention to what's going on in the industry. And this is, again, a long time ago. And I realized that if I wanted to advance, I probably needed, and that just happened to be the first certification that I learned about. So I took that one. But very quickly thereafter, less than a year, I sat for NEFHIMA's CCSP credential, because at that time I was working in the professional fee coding arena. And so the CPC and the CCSP are the things that made sense to me. And thereafter, of course, different credentials came. Most of them came because of something I either was requested to do or something that was in my career goals. So for example, I wanted to become an inpatient coder. That interested me because at the time I knew that inpatient coding was much more in depth than like outpatient clinic coding. And so it just intrigued me. And so I studied for and passed the CCS exam, and then moved into doing more with inpatient coding and ultimately auditing and education. So every one of these credentials have a story behind them. And I won't go off on a tangent and tell you all of the stories. But when we get to the Q&A at the end, if you guys have any questions about that or why I selected a certain credential, you can feel free to ask that. Now, I was born and raised in Florida, in Central Florida, right outside of Ocala. And after high school, I got married like many of the people in my small town did, and married a military man, and we went to Germany. From Germany to Mississippi, Mississippi to Texas. And after he got out of the service, I ended up back here in Florida, and I've been in Orange Park, Florida since December of 2006. So from an educational standpoint, and I did not put this on here because I didn't think about it, but actually the very first piece of education that I got was getting books. I ordered books from NEFHIMA, like workbooks and training books. I ordered books from the American Medical Association on CPT coding. They have this book called Principles of CPT, and it also has exercises and things. And that actually is where I started getting like some self-education in coding. And then I ended up taking a coding certificate program, again, which I forgot to put on this slide. I ended up taking a coding certificate program that was offered through 3M. They have a health information management arm. And I took a coding certificate course through them, passed the course, and then I ended up taking a coding certificate course through Northern Virginia Community College. So although I didn't have a degree in anything dealing with health information or coding, I did make sure that I was educated in that. And that ultimately, of course, is what helped me be able to pass those certification exams and advance in my career. So I, oddly enough, as much as I loved helping my grandmother out, I had a passion and still have a passion for social justice, and I do some volunteerism and in that area. And so I decided I wanted a criminal justice degree. And so I started going to college and seeking a criminal justice degree and doing coursework and all of that, and kind of got derailed for a bunch of years because I was growing. My career was just progressing and advancing so fast. And I would be in a position maybe a year or two, and then the next thing you knew they were moving me to something else, because thankfully I connected with people throughout my career that saw something in me. And so that's the reason why I do that same thing with others. And I will mentor, even unofficially, I will mentor people and I will help them and give them advice and listen to them and kind of help them along the way, because that's what was done for me. So ultimately, I did obtain my BS in criminal justice. I actually have a certificate also in healthcare technology from Santa Fe College. And with the certificate in healthcare technology, I did that because at the time, we were seeing more and more about electronic health records. Now, you've got to remember, when I started my career, we were pretty much everything paper, and the only quote unquote electronic thing you probably had was maybe dictation, or maybe lab reports, of course, were going to be electronic, or radiology reports were going to be electronic. But just your medical record documentation as a whole, most of that was not electronic. And if it was, a lot of times it wasn't like an actual system. It was just a little different. And so when I saw the industry moving more towards electronic health records and electronic medical records, that ultimately is why I decided to get that certificate in healthcare technology, and then sit for the Certified Healthcare Technology Specialist certification, because it just kind of puts a stamp on that yes, you're proficient in that area. After I finished that, a few years later, then I finished my BS in criminal justice, and this past fall, I began the Juris Master program at Florida State University in healthcare regulation, ultimately with the goal of working more in compliance, maybe at the executive level, and we'll see if I end up moving forward with the Juris Doctorate degree, which is what you would need in order to be able to sit for the bar exam here in Florida. So here's my credentials. As you can see, most of them are coding related. And a lot of people, when they mention me, they'll say that I have coding credentials, and I do. But I want you to notice that I don't only have coding credentials. Now, of course, by far they are coding credentials. Most of them are. But I'm also certified in healthcare technology. I'm also a certified compliance officer, which goes well far beyond coding. I'm also a certified instructor, and I have taught at the college level, the post-secondary level. I did that for many years, and have taught seminars and workshops and things like that, not just on coding. And so even in my job, I'm the audit and education manager in my full-time job. But then in my consulting business, of course, I'm a consultant, and most of that actually is not even coding. And so you really want to, in my opinion, look at things outside of just like that tunnel vision, I'm going to do this one thing. And the reason that I did that is because what if one day coding is not done at the level or in the way that it's done now? I didn't want to put myself in such a box that I could not work outside of that if industry needs change. And so that's kind of how you see the mixture here of certifications. As part of the Juris Master program that I'm doing, I can sit for the certification in human resources. So it's like professional of human resources, the PHR. And so I'm probably going to do that because I'm learning so much about human resources. And that's an important thing. You know, when you're running a business, you kind of want to know about human resources. And so it's just another thing that I can add to my plate. Now, oddly enough, I am not certification happy. So I actually don't like taking certification exams. As I told you before, each of these certifications have a story, and they were a means to an end. It was I needed to do a certain thing in order to show proficiency in a particular area in order to help me obtain an opportunity. Okay, and so I never took a certification just to take it. If I did that, I could have 20 certifications, right? So I was very targeted at what certifications I did take. So in my role with KIWI-TEK, as I mentioned, I'm the audit education manager, but I'm also the compliance point of contact. So anything dealing with a compliance, whether it's a complaint, whether it's a concern, whether it's something that needs to be looked into, those things flow to me, and that actually ends up being a lot of what I do on a daily basis. I also, as part of the education part of my job, I track all of the required employee training. You know, we have to get HIPAA training, annual updates for CPT, HIPAA, and ICD-10. Of course, I was really busy over this past year, as it seemed like every time we turned around, there was some new guidance being issued or some clarification being issued related to COVID-19 and billing for encounters related to COVID-19, or coding and billing for, for telemedicine, compliance for telemedicine, HIPAA compliance, all of these things. And so I've been really busy with that over the past year. And thankfully, we're almost a year in now. And so a lot of those things are smoothed out, but there's still questions and there's still compliance issues that arise. I'm also our account administrator for any software that we use that relates to either coding, auditing, or compliance. Okay, and so we use various programs and software programs for that. And I'm the one that kind of oversees that, making sure that people aren't using multiple logins and people aren't sharing and sharing things, giving access, also removing access when someone's no longer employed with us, or if they no longer need access in order to perform their function. Okay. Also, all of our, KIWI-TEK is a small business, but we have a lot of clients. We've got over 500 coders, as the last time I checked. But we have coders, we have auditors. I work in education. We have management. It's a lot of things working together in order to keep, in order to function properly as an organization. And so anytime we have, a client reaches out and they want some auditing support, or like right now, we've got one that wants some CDI support. And so I'm working with drafting all of those things just to make sure everything's laid out from a contracting perspective, and that we know what it is that's expected, and that we on our end can be compliant in achieving those goals. And that's, again, a very big part of my job. We also have a resource and training website, and so I'm responsible for managing the content on that website. We give at least monthly training sessions, CEU approved training sessions. And so most of the time I'm the one that's going to be giving those or presenting those. And so coordinating, getting the CEU approval, putting everything together, handling the registrations, sending out the CEU certificates afterwards. Those are all things I do. Also, I've been a conference speaker for many years. Actually, it predates my time with KIWI-TEK. And I also still do some of that on the consulting side as well. That's not a part of my job with KIWI-TEK. But I've spoken at many, conferences. I've spoken multiple times at the NEFHIMA National Conference. I've spoken multiple times at the AAPC's HealthCon, which is their national conference. I've served as a subject matter expert for multiple organizations, such as the Mississippi Mississippi Hospital Association, the Florida Hospital Association. For several years now, I've been a subject matter expert for the Georgia Hospital Association. And those are all things that I'm mentioning now as part of my audit and education manager role. But again, these things actually transcend that, because even if my role with KIWI-TEK ended, those connections that I've made are going to last beyond any job that I do, because you create a professional relationship with the person or with that organization that transcends your position with the company. Okay. Also, I'm the internship and externship coordinator for KIWI-TEK, and so we have interns or externs rotating in and out. We have a partnership with Indiana University. KIWI-TEK is based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. But aside from that, I've also served as a mentor for both NEFHIMA and AAPC, and I've done that for years. Right now, and I've got it on the bottom of this list, the quarterly newsletter, and that is in the making. So hopefully we'll get to the point for it being quarterly. It technically is in my job description to oversee that. Now, I don't have to write it all, but I do have to oversee it, edit it, find authors, things like that. However, as you can look at these bullet points here, my time is very, very limited. And so that last bullet has kind of had to fall to the wayside a little bit, but hopefully we can get to a point where I can do that on a quarterly basis. So I'm currently, as Dr. Banta mentioned, the president of the Northeast Florida Health Information Management Association. And I would highly recommend that you volunteer with the association if you have an opportunity. If you don't want to volunteer at the regional level, if you're an NEFHIMA member, you can volunteer at the state level, or even you can volunteer at the national level. I actually started volunteering at the national level because I didn't even know that NEFHIMA existed at the time when I started volunteering back in 2007, because I moved here in 2006. So it was years after that before I even found out that NEFHIMA even existed. And I just kind of connected with folks at the national level. And so I started volunteering there and working on different committees and things. It's a 3-year commitment. So you serve 1 year as president-elect, 1 year as president, and then 1 year as past president. So it is it is a commitment if you're an officer, right? But you can serve on a committee, or you can just volunteer with the organization, and it can be just volunteering for a single event, or it can be volunteering just for a year. You don't have to necessarily be an officer, and of course you want to be active in the organization before becoming an officer anyway. So as president, I normally would have been president-elect up until June 30th of 2021. However, our past president, Kelly Cooper, was elected to a position at the on KHIM as a director. I believe she's a director now. And so she had to step down her role as president. So then, of course, I had to step up a little bit earlier than expected. So instead of serving a year as president, I'll actually end up serving a year and a half as president. As part of that, I'm responsible for maintaining or creating the policy and procedure manual NEFHIMA's been really great that they already had the manual, and there really wasn't much that, really wasn't anything I can think of that I needed to do aside from just reading it and making sure that I understood what the policies and procedures were for the organization. I'm responsible for presiding over all association meetings, and that's according to our bylaws. However, I can delegate that. Dr. Banta is our president-elect for NEFHIMA, and so I get to work very closely with her on this as it relates to presiding over meetings and things like that. I serve as a liaison with the Florida Health Information Management Association, or FEHIMA. And so we have calls with them, and I have deliverables we have to do, and I have to report on things that our association has either in the works or things that we're doing. I'm, responsible for passing information along from FEHIMA to our NEFHIMA board and ultimately our members. And I'm required to continue being an active member of NEFHIMA and hold an NEFHIMA approved credential in order to serve as president. So I don't have to maintain active AHIMA membership, but I do have to maintain active NEFHIMA membership. Now, I think there's great benefit in AHIMA membership, and so of course I do have an AHIMA membership. What I did not include in here was my consulting work, and that's because it's so straightforward. But later on, I'll show you in my career path how that comes into play. Because that can be anything from reviewing medical records for an attorney's office and giving input as to whether or not I believe that there could have potentially been some fraud, or it could be providing expert testimony, expert witness testimony on things. It could also just simply mean I've developed compliance plans for organizations. I've completely created their training programs, and all of those are things that I've done from a consulting side. So as I told you before, I'm very much into social justice. I'm just bent that way. And so I do serve as executive director of Hearts by Faith, which is a women's charity, or not-for-profit organization. And we just do work with women who have been dealing with fear, anxiety, worry, things like that. Just helping to come alongside people and strengthen them. I've served for many years as an AAPC and AHIMA mentor. I did have to step away from doing so much of that just with COVID, because everything was just, it was a lot from a work perspective. And so my last mentee ended in December of 2020, and I have not created a relationship beyond that with any additional mentees. But of course, once things die down, I more than likely will do that again, because as I mentioned before, I actually enjoy that part of giving back. I've served on the FEHIMA Legislative Committee. I've also served as the FEHIMA Telemedicine SME and subject matter expert. And if you've looked at the regulatory review guide, if you're a member of AHIMA and you have access to the FEHIMA information, I actually am the one that revised that telemedicine section within the regulatory reference guide. I've served on various AHIMA committees throughout my career. I served just as a committee member, but also as a committee chair. So that, that's just a part of, again, my makeup. Also with AAPC, I previously was a local chapter president. And I served in AAPC local chapter for 3 years as an officer. But of course, because I am an AAPC member, I still continue to support my local chapter even though I'm a NEFHIMA officer. I've written various articles for industry magazines. I just last week just finished an interview for another magazine. So not only just writing, but also providing my expert opinion on different things. And those are all things, of course, that come over time. I mean, I've been in this field over 20 years. And so one of the things that I think about is this Dr. Seuss quote. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. And that's why I say chart your own path, chart your own path. In a Forbes article that was posted back in August of 2008, I recommend that you read this if you have an opportunity. It's called 5 Things You Can Do to Advance Your Career. And in that, the author stated that to advance your career, you need to have a plan. And she also recommended creating a career roadmap. NEFHIMA is really big about creating your career roadmaps, and they actually have resources on the website for a career roadmap. I think that's a vital step in identifying the many steps along the way that you can take, not that you have to take, but that you can take in order to ultimately get to the end result, which would be like your final part of your journey. So as a with KIWI-TEK, how I ended up in the audit and education manager, I started off as a HIM technician, doing assembly and analysis, putting charts together. Very quickly, probably 6 months or so, I stood out to my manager and she said, we're going to make you the lead. And so I was the lead in that area. And then I began training others on how to perform assembly and analysis. And this was back in the paper chart record. Then I moved on to becoming a health information technician. And it was called health information technician, but it was a coding position initially. And then once I got certified, it ended up being, I did more auditing. And ultimately, I became the medical services coordinator for coding. And that was where I got to travel. I got to educate physicians at different locations that were a part of that group. And I was able to just, look at medical records, look for trends, think about payment and other policies, and give opinion or advice. From there, I became a coding trainer, and I was a coding trainer for probably about a year before I was promoted to lead coding trainer with that organization. Now, that was a contract position, and ultimately the contract ended. The new company actually wanted me to stay on as their lead coding trainer. But I, at that point, decided I wanted a little bit more. I moved on to being a coding manager and then be an audit and education manager. Now, while all of this was going on, I had another path mapped out. And this is where I told you I did not stick to just coding. Okay. So I wanted to become an expert in very specific areas of coding to help my full-time job, but I knew ultimately I wanted to be sought out as an expert. And in order to do that, you've got to show, that you're diverse in a way. And so I began my consulting career as a contract coder, then moving on to a coding consultant where I was not coding, but I was giving advice, opinion, and consulting with others about their coding. Then I became a senior coding consultant, ultimately an educator, and then I became president, or I established my company, which is Access Quality Coding and Consulting. And then I was able to do, even for some reason, once that title of president went behind my name, I seemed to be sought out even more. And that's when I moved more into the legal aspect of compliance and things. So some of the benefits of the various things that I've done is that I have a very diverse background. As I mentioned before, it does contain a lot of coding, but it does not only contain coding. I've helped design electronic health records. I've served as system administrator for certain hospitals with their electronic health records. If you like a fast-paced environment, as an audit and education manager, or either as a consultant, or even, president of your own consulting company, it's probably going to be a fast-paced environment. So if that's a benefit for me, because I just like to keep my hands busy doing things. I don't like too much idle time. But if you're a person that wants a slower paced environment, this might not be the path you want to take. The benefit is also that you get sought out as a subject matter expert. So I very, very rarely will reach out to others. Like, I don't submit proposals to be able to speak at conferences. I don't submit proposals to get, various contracts on my own. Now, of course, with KIWI-TEK's, there's some of that happens, because that's a different type of company. But for my consulting work, I don't do that. I could do that, but frankly, I don't have the time for it. But people seek me out because I have an established reputation in the industry. Okay. And so that's a benefit of it. And it's something you have to keep cultivating. And then I also get to give back to others. And so that's a great benefit. But there are some challenges. When you stay so busy, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget to keep that ongoing education. So you really, when you've got people coming to you as an expert, you have to stay up to date. You just have to. If that means signing up to get updates from the Federal Register, which I get those every morning, so I can see what's out there as it relates to proposed rules or final rules from a government standpoint. Making sure that periodically I'm looking to see if there's been any new memos or things from various insurance companies, looking into like legislation from the state of Florida. Like a couple of years ago, when we had a bunch going back and forth with telehealth, and so staying up to date can be a challenge, but you really have to set goals and make it a priority to stay up to date and to continue your education. Because especially if you're dealing with the field of compliance, or if you're dealing with the field of coding, things can change several times throughout the year. Things can be clarified, things can be scrapped and done away with. And if you are not keeping up to date, then you will be giving inaccurate information to others. And that is a good way to just completely tarnish your professional reputation. Also, sometimes communication can be challenging, simply because a lot of what I do ends up being via email, or writing and things like that. And so I always have to remind myself that you can't really infer tone in email, because you don't know. Very matter of fact, point blank person. And so sometimes for me, people will think I'm being harsh. Or if I remember one time I had sent someone had sent a question, and so I said according to, and then I quoted, what the source was. And then I just copied and pasted it, and the person thought that was condescending. Now I think that probably spoke a little bit more about the person, because I definitely wasn't being condescending. I was just giving them the information, and I really didn't. I had no bad thoughts or ill will about it at all. I was just doing my job. But communication can be a challenge, and so I have to make it a point to periodically pick up the phone and talk to people, right? So that they get a feel for what my personality is. They can put a voice to it. And so then they learn a little bit more about me and my character, while I'm learning more about them and their character, so that if an email comes across and it seems a little weird, you can handle that with grace. And that's kind of my thing, is I say I just give people grace. I don't automatically think bad. Delegation can also be challenging, especially when it's your reputation. I have had some struggles in that area, because I would delegate certain high priority things to others, because I was working on something else that was high priority, and I just really couldn't do both of them. And just trusted that person was just able to handle it, right? And it ended up not being the best, the information being inaccurate or not being shared in the proper way. And so delegation can be a challenge. It has been a challenge for me, but I don't give up on that. I still come alongside people. I still delegate. I believe in managing people to independence, and so I'm going to equip them and give them all the tools that I can see that they need, and I'm going to hope that they come to me with additional tools that they believe they need that maybe I haven't shown them. And that doesn't mean I'm going to provide everything for them. Sometimes it might be, okay, you're working in education, and so here's this organization. You might want to go and look there and review some of their training on how to be an effective educator. Learn about the different types of learners, because if you don't know the different types of learners, it's very difficult for you to be an effective instructor or an effective educator. Also, challenges can be another challenge can be unrealistic expectations. This can be expectations that you put on others or on yourself. So a very early mistake I made was I expected everyone to work the way I work and have the same value system that I have. And that's just not the case. We're all individual, we're all human. I'm not perfect, they're not perfect. And we each have our own little quirks and our own little things. And so we can't put unrealistic expectations on people. But then we also have to recognize when others are putting unrealistic expectations on us and be able to work all of that out in the workplace. So recommendations: define success for yourself. And that can be tricky, but I think it's something that we should all spend some time with and thinking, what does success look like to me? Is success based on money? Is it based on notoriety? Is it based on influence? Is it based on position title? Like, what does success mean to me, right? Study hard, of course, even when you are in the field. Diversify, network. I cannot say that enough. Set yourself some incremental and long-term goals. Get involved in community. And the reason I say community is because it doesn't always have to be health information management. As I mentioned, with the work I do with Hearts by Faith, that has nothing at all to do with health information management. Now, there are times where someone might need help navigating, maybe understanding their insurance policy, or they're having trouble getting a certain procedure approved or a certain test approved by their payer. And of course, I'm very well versed in medical necessity and payer policy, and I have access to at least all the payers I can think of. I have access to their policies through a database that I have. And so I can go and pull the policy and be like, okay, this is the policy and this is what it says, and this is what they say is needed in order for them to cover that test. And so I can help others do that, but it's not the focus of everything I do. There's some things that I do that just have nothing to do with health information management, but it doesn't mean that I don't at times have an opportunity to insert that in there. I recommend having a mentor/mentee relationship, and it does not have to be an official one. It really doesn't. As I told you before, I don't have any official mentees right now, right? However, I have some unofficial ones, people that I've been mentoring for years. Not only that, I have a mentor. So I'm not beyond having a mentor and getting advice and working out some things. You also want to stay relevant. So that might mean, writing for, saying, hey, I wrote this article. Would you be interested in publishing it, right? And then become an expert. So with the expert, there's a book called Outliers. You may want to read that if you haven't, but that book states that it takes about 10,000 hours or approximately 10 years of deliberate practice to become an expert. And so one of the problems we have in coding is someone will code for a year or two and say that, and they'll think that they're an expert. Well, the reality is you haven't seen enough in 2 or 3 years in order to be an expert. So if you're setting a goal of being an expert in something, I'm not saying it absolutely has to be 10,000 hours or 10 years, but what I'm going to say is that lets us know that it is not something that happens overnight. It's something that you have to work at. So there's, I mentioned, or on the slide before I said networking, but I wanted to go a little deeper in that here. There's 5 myths of networking. I put them on the slide here for you. This is from an article that I read. I've been giving this out for probably 2 or 3 years now. It really is a very good article. It's for women, but it really is, I mean, men can read it too. It's fine. It's good information, I believe. And so I think that that would be helpful. That, you know, people tell you network, network, network. Networking is not just going to a meeting and sitting in there, listening to the meeting, getting up at the end and leaving. Okay, you got information, but did you really network? No. Like, did you learn something new about someone? Did you tell someone something about you? Did you share at all? Did you make contacts at all? Okay, so that's something that you really want to think about, especially as a student. You want to start making those connections now. Most people find jobs even now to this day. Most of the jobs that people find is in some way due to networking, right? All righty. So as part of your career goals, I do recommend that you set timelines. And this is an example. So like complete, you know, you want to successfully complete a program and give it a date. If you want to obtain a specific position, put a date to it, and then set incremental goals along the way that are going to help you be more marketable for that position. So that's just an example there. And then I just have some practical tips as we get ready to close. These are just tips, you know, about just being a good human. You know, don't be so specialized that you can't perform other functions. I have cleaned bathrooms. Nothing is beyond me. Nothing is to where I'm going to say that's outside of my job description or I'm too good for that, you know. I have had to stand in the office. You know, I'm not a clinical professional, but there was a female patient in a male physician, and he needed someone, you know, to be in there, kind of like a chaperone. And everyone else was busy. He came to my office, and I was their coder at the time. He came to my office and said, "I just need you to stand in the corner of the room." Of course, even though I wasn't going to touch anything or anyone, I had to, you know, wash my hands, sterilize, all of that. But here, I just need you to stand in the corner of the room and just be a chaperone. I could have easily said, "I'm a coder and I don't know anything about patient care or anything like that." But I didn't. I gladly did that because that made a better environment for the patient and for the provider. And it was something I could do that was not outside of my capability to do. Okay. Make friends as you move along the way. I've got friends that date all the way back to my very first paid position in health information management. Many of the jobs, and as I remember, I told you, I don't go out and seek out contracts or speaking engagements, anything like that. But most of the things that I've gotten are because of someone I knew gave someone my name. And I do the same thing for others. Another thing, I took Franklin Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If again, when you're talking about advancement, that might be something you might want to read. And I think they even have some videos. I took an actual class or I guess a workshop where we went there and it was a week. And so we had live instruction and videos and exercises and all of that. However, one of the things that stuck out in that was never talk bad about your supervisors. That's easy for me because I just don't talk bad about people. But the other part is don't listen to others talk bad about them, because silence often indicates agreement. So just don't participate in the office politics. Don't participate in the negativity. If anything, be known for the one that's going to be positive. Okay. And then lastly, don't just stop with being a blank. I'm never just a coder. I'm never just an audit and education manager. I'm never just a certified compliance officer. I'm never just NEFHIMA's president, right? I'm not going to stop with being a blank. I am Katrina, and as part of that, it encompasses a lot of things and a lot of talents, a lot of skills, a lot of weaknesses also that I'm working on, but I'm never going to stop at being just a title or just a position. And with that, I will turn things over. I think we got about 10 minutes, and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Banta for whatever you want to do next.
All right, thank you so much. Go ahead and keep sharing your screen if you don't mind.
Okay.
What an interesting journey you've had. I appreciate you sharing your insights with us. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. Feel free to enter your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask verbally if you wish. And while we're waiting for questions, if you want that CEU credit for being here, shoot me an email at charlenebanta@sjrstate.edu. It's on the screen here. And we'll be sure to get that CEU credit out to you. Any questions for Katrina?
How do you handle the hurdles of being a military spouse and having to move every few years?
That was very difficult. I'm not gonna lie. That was such a very difficult thing. That the way I looked at it is, very early on, I had to decide whether I was going to get upset every time I started working towards something and building in my career, and then 3 years go by and you got to move, or 2 years go by and you got to move, or in the case of Mississippi, we were there a year and a half and Katrina happened, and then we had to move to Texas. So I decided that I was going to look at each of them as I learned what I needed to learn in the time that I was there in that position. I made connections with people that were going to be lasting. Some I was going to sever because they didn't need to continue, but I made some lasting connections. I learned some things that I was going to be able to take to the next part of the journey. Also, I knew ahead of time, of course, when we were going to be moving around, and so I would start looking. Then I would look at. So, for example, if you want to do anything with health information or coding or anything like that, you know, it's difficult at times to get a GS job. Even as a spouse, you get spousal preference, but guess what? Every other spouse gets preference too, you know? So it's good, but it doesn't guarantee you a job, you know? And so what I would start doing was looking at who were the contractors at that particular base that dealt with either medical records, compliance, IT, whatever it was. I would look at the contractors. I would go to their websites, because all of that stuff's public information. I would look at their websites. I would see what positions they had available, and I would start applying there. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? We have about 7 more minutes. And again, if you're one of my students and want credit for being here, do be sure that you have your full name listed. You can enter it in the chat or rename yourself in the participant list.
Okay. Well, on this last slide, I put some contact information for myself. Now, while I don't give out my personal Facebook because I like to keep things separate, we do have a NEFHIMA Facebook page, and you'll see me on there from time to time. If you are not on that page, please join it. You do not have to be a member of NEFHIMA in order to join the group. But I just really think, especially for students, it's good to just know what's going on, because we're going to share other things, even things dealing with AHIMA on there. LinkedIn, if you want to connect with me on there, feel free to do that. You can email me if you have questions or advice. I know sometimes, you know, for me on this end of things, of course, I hate the dreaded silence. That comes almost every time at the end when you get to questions. And sometimes it's that people just don't really know what to ask. They've just soaked in a lot of information, and sometimes it's like, I'm a slow processor. If you don't know what that is, it's a whole challenge at times, but I'm a slow processor. And so sometimes it can be an hour or two later and I'm like, wait a minute, what was that? I have a question. If that happens to you, you can email me. I can't promise that I'll get back to you immediately, but what I will tell you is I will prioritize it and I will get back to you as quickly as I can.
All right, last call for questions before we wrap up today's session.
Are there any in the chat maybe?
Melissa says your story really inspires, so thank you. And I'll echo that. It's quite the journey you've had, and I look forward to seeing where your future goes.
Thank you, and thank you, Melissa. On a personal note, you know, this isn't something that you would usually share in a slide, but you know, I grew up in a small town, and I was surrounded by poverty, right? And although my family, you know, ends met at the end of every month, but we didn't have extra. We, you know, we had love and we had the things that we needed. And for a long time, that's what drove me, was the fact that I didn't want my family, you know, my husband, my children, I didn't want us to ever be in a poverty type situation or a living paycheck to paycheck type of situation. My life did not start to change until I got out of that mindset and I started thinking differently. What can I do to help others? What can I do to advance myself? What can I do to make a better future for my children? See, at the end of the day, it still all leads to not being in poverty, but it was a different motivation. So I don't know if that helps somebody, but I don't usually share that, but I just felt compelled to right there.
Yeah, that completely resonates with me, and it's you speak the truth. That is true. Lynn has a question. She wants to know if you will continue with compliance after you receive your JD.
Yes. What I would like to do is become a chief compliance officer, and then also branch out more in the consulting side. Now, the part that I don't know is if I will actually sit for the bar. Because I actually don't want to be a practicing attorney. And as part of this process, what I've learned is that most people that get the Juris Doctorate actually don't sit for the Florida bar. They work as executives and legal consultants and things like that. And that was an eye-opening thing for me. Good question. Okay, are there any more?
We have a couple of thank yous, and if there are no further questions, again, I cannot thank you enough for being with us today and sharing your insights. Would encourage everyone to join us next month when we'll have another speaker share their story. I think we have 2 more in the spring semester, and then we'll take a break for the summer. So have a wonderful day, and we will see you next month.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.